Hi, everyone. Welcome to Real Estate Talk with Nelia today, where I am her special guest. Nelia and I have been working together probably for more than 10 years, and we've seen up markets, down markets. One thing that Nelia really does very well is she specializes in working with investors. And we've done a ton of different transactions together, and Nelia holds different groups where she gets a lot of investors together. She will always bring in different professionals. And the whole goal is to just kind of elevate your game as an investor. Now, a lot of investors, they don't realize the different levels of investors out there, meaning that a lot of them try to jump from, hey, I want to become a real estate investor because it sounds cool to own 100 units. And they don't realize that there's a lot of steps involved in getting to 100 units, not only financially, but there's a lot of mental development there, a lot of understanding in how real estate really works. And so today, what we really want to cover is just from your entry level 1 investor to your level 5 investor and everything in between, what that looks like, what that progression is like. And, no one better than Nelia to talk about that, because Nelia's experience, she's not only had the single family rental, she's also got to the point where she built a portfolio of 160 units. I remember when she called me and said, hey, I'm going to buy out of state because out of state, that's the next thing. And we're going to buy an apartment complex in Alabama because this, and this, and this. And this was years and years and years ago, before everybody started looking out of state, before COVID, before the borders, so to speak, kind of disappeared. And now you have investors. The beauty about COVID is that it kind of took all that away, and now investors realize that we could live here and invest anywhere around the country. And what matters more than anything is the right people that you work with, the right financing, really understanding what is a good rental versus a bad rental, and really understanding where you stand as an investor. Are you a level 1? Are you a level 3? And what is your next step? So Nelia, thanks for having me as your special guest today. And then recently you came out with a book, just got released, and it's a big hit. And it's really where you just kind of took in everything that you've learned. And I'm sure along the way, you probably made a ton of different mistakes that no one really took you in and said, hey, Nelia, do it this way or this way. And so your book, Real Estate Investing, Nothing Held Back, really goes deep into that. How do you become the right investor, and how do you do it the right way? So tell us, first, the question that I have is, how hard was it to write a book?
That was a hell of an introduction. Can I just say that? That was amazing. Thank you. Thank you actually for agreeing to come here today and do this with me. I'm very excited. We actually have known each other for 15 years. I was thinking yesterday, I'm like, when did we meet last? It was 2008. First time I met you. I'm glad that you're here. You're my always go-to person as a lender. You always seem to save my deals when my clients tend to venture out into a different direction. You save the day at the end of the day. So I'm very excited to have you here. I'm very excited to unpack a lot of these questions that come up on a daily basis with us, that we can hopefully help our listeners to take them into that next level and help them, inspire them at the end of the day to want to invest and do something with their money. So I forgot what the question was.
Look, how hard was it to write the book?
The book was I had a lot of ideas in my head that were just packed in there for years. My husband told me, let's write a book, put this all in writing. And it was just like pulling teeth for me. It was extremely hard to get all my thoughts on paper and do that outline, do those bullet points. So what ended up happening is Joel, my husband, sat down with me, and it was like an interview. Okay, do you want to talk about teamwork? How do you build a team? How do you buy outside of state? Do you want to talk about taxes? And I'd say yes, let's talk about it. What do you want to talk about it? I don't know. So it was a matter of him asking me the right questions where I would give him answers, and then we would sit down and make an outline and then break down these are the chapters, this is how we're going to do it, and then one by one, we wrote the chapters down, and then I'd go back and reread it, edit it, and then we ended up hiring 2 editors, fired one. So it was painful. I won't lie to you. It was a lot of work. And then the audiobook's actually coming out this week. That's all done. It's in review right now. So for those that are more, like I need an audiobook, that option is also available.
Now, did you hire somebody to read the book, or are you reading the book?
I did not read the book. I hired somebody. We had auditions done. So that was another thing I had to learn. Like, there's different types of ways to read something. I needed them to be articulate, and I needed them to be engaging, because I didn't want people to fall asleep listening to the book, right? So I didn't know what it is. I didn't know what I didn't know. So then I would get all these people that were auditioning, go on their websites, and, if they're reading a novel and it's romantic, the voice had to be different.
Right.
So all those terminology and all those things I ended up having to learn in this short period of time. It was exciting. The process was interesting at the end of the day. But the lady that read the book, she has a British accent too, because I figured with my accent, I didn't want to read it, but it had to be somebody that read it, had to have an accent as well. So it gives it that extra twist now.
Mm-hmm.
So when I now read with her, with her voice in my head.
That's funny.
That is interesting.
That is funny. Yeah, I know. I listen to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks and whatnot, and I got to tell you, when you don't have the right voice reading the right type of book, even though the content might be great, it just doesn't flow. So yeah, I always wondered, how much time people spent. Now, when the author reads it, it's great because they bring their level of energy and everything and how they want to present it. But nonetheless, I mean, it's not always, there's tons of great people out there. And so I'm excited to listen to it when it does come out. Now, tell me, Nelia, first, you probably receive a ton of different calls from investors, just kind of like how I do, where you get your entry level investor that saw online that it's great to have a rental portfolio, and they're calling you saying, how do I buy an apartment complex? And then I'm sure you have the super advanced investor that's looking at, hey, I want a 1031 exchange. Everybody keeps mentioning a 1031 exchange, yet very few people really understand it. They say they know it, but then you ask them to explain it, and they really don't know it. Could you, walk us through what you feel like is a level 1 investor and where somebody starts? If you're listening to this and you've never purchased a property before, but yet you want to own that rental empire, so to speak. You want to create those mailbox checks. Where do they start, and what's some advice that you give people like that?
They start with you.
Start with me.
Truly,
all right.
They just start with you, because we need to know how much money they have to play with. You are essentially the person they need to speak to. Talk to a lender, figure out how much down payment do they need, Oleg?
So that's a great question. Most people, they have this, some people believe that you need a large down payment if you're just buying a rental no matter what. And others don't realize that you could buy a primary residence multifamily, live in one of the units, and rent out the other 1, 2, or 3 additional units. And essentially you're buying a commercial building as a primary. And that's really the lowest barrier of entry. By default, the standard is 3.5% down on a FHA loan, 5% down on a conventional. However, we at NFM Lending just came out with our own product. This is weeks ago, called Zero Flex, and it's a down payment assistance FHA loan. You don't have to be a first-time home buyer, and I want to bring that up because I think that's very important. If somebody's listening to this, they already have a home. The key is you have to live in one of the units for a year, but you could essentially buy a duplex, triplex, fourplex, zero down. And now that's your beginning lowest barrier of entry.
Foot in the door.
Yeah, that's your foot in the door. If you have a great agent that's able to negotiate, you could even get the seller to cover your closing costs, and you could do a true zero down purchase on a multifamily property. So I would say, that's the lowest barrier of entry, is really zero down. Now, will it work for everybody? No. But will it work for a lot of people? Absolutely. And there's a lot of people, that's their beginning, and that's where they start. But I also want to say that's where they end. Why? Because a lot of them don't realize that there is work being a landlord.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of them make mistakes where they get emotionally tied to the property because they come in there, they remodel it as if they're going to live there. They put in the nicest things, and then they're like paranoid on who do I let in.
Exactly.
I don't want that person to rent it. I want that person to rent it. And I think that's the wrong mindset. The mindset that you have to overcome as a level 1 investor is that this is a business. You need to buy a property that is going to cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
You need to put stuff in there that's going to be durable.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about how good it looks. Is it have staying power? Are you being smart with how you remodel it? Are you remodeling it for the right reason, or you're just trying to make it your beautiful home to live in? And I think that's where a lot of level 1 investors get caught up, is the trap of making a property their own versus turning it into a business. Yeah. What are your thoughts? What are some of the other
with the whole
see?
Yeah, those are pretty big mistakes. They rehab these properties as if they were gonna live in them, and I usually tell my clients, like, yes, fix things up, don't be a slumlord, put the LVP flooring, put your new paint, new lighting, whatever that is, whatever upgrades you need to do. You don't necessarily need to replace your kitchen. You can get away with painting those cabinets and replacing that hardware, and it looks amazing. Yep. You don't have to go crazy and spend gazillion dollars on a unit that you're about to rent for $1,800 a month.
Yep.
Right? Like you said, this is business at the end of the day. Make smart business decisions. But in terms of the down payment, I want to cover that. If they are owner occupied, yes, it is 3.5% or 0 down, 3.5% FHA, 0 down, or they can do 5% conventional. But if they're investors, let's say they have a home and they got a little bit of stock money that they can play with, mm-hmm. at the end of the day, it's usually 20% on a single family.
Yep, 20 to 25%.
And then if they want to buy duplex, triplex, and or fourplex, it's 25% down payment down. Yeah, is what they need to have. Mm-hmm. And then I believe you don't need to qualify a building, you qualify borrower.
So there's 2 types of loans out there right now. One is based on the borrower's ability, meaning their income. The other mm-hmm. one, and I think this is, I'm glad you brought this up, where a lot of people in the past might have gotten turned down because their income just isn't sufficient. Even though we allow rents to be used for qualifying purposes, some people might have just changed their business, or mm-hmm. now all of a sudden their debt to income ratio is way out of line because they've purchased some vehicles that are throwing it off, or they wrote off way too much on their taxes if they're self-employed. There are programs out there right now for less than 4 units that you could buy that qualify off of the debt service coverage ratio, mm-hmm. DSCR, which allow us to use the rents for qualifying. Mm-hmm. And that market really took off about a year ago, mm-hmm. where now all of a sudden it's very, very common. Enough people have known about it. And a lot of people, go into this loan thinking it's hard money. It's really not hard money. If you look at, you could say, conventional regular financing, then you have hard money. DSCR is kind of that sweet spot in the middle. And the reason why I say that is because they allow things that conventional doesn't, yet they're not completely blind to just giving you a loan like a lot of hard money does, mm-hmm. because it is still a 30-year term. But nonetheless, rate-wise, too, it's right in the middle, too. It's not aggressive as you purchasing a income qualifying property where you're qualifying off your income, but it's also not hard money where it's in the 12% range.
So what's the term on what's the rate on those?
Usually between 8 and 9%.
And then it's a 30-year loan.
It's a 30-year loan.
Fixed.
It's fixed. A lot of times it is, if they're putting more down, they get a better rate. You could get yourself into the 7s if you put enough down. A lot of investors look at that loan for 2 types of reasons. 1 is ease, 2 is income. They don't have to show income. And then 3 is if they cap themselves at 10 properties and now they want the next one, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac doesn't allow. They only allow up to 10. Therefore, that's their 11th, 12th, 50th and so forth property if that's the route they try to go. So
Okay.
now,
I actually want to unpack that today. When they have 10 properties, what do you do? We're going to come back to that since we're still covering
since we're
level
still
one
kind of level one,
investor.
so we should probably jump into level two. So level two investor, this is, where I feel personally they have a unit or two, and now they want to expand that. They're not in the commercial space by any means, but now they want to have a couple different units. Would you say level two investors are somebody that maybe has up to five to maybe 9 people that are paying them rent each month? Could be
Probably. Yeah.
two
Like,
fourplexes, or it could be 5 or 6 single family homes, because that's the route that they
yeah,
decided
it's
to
your
take.
level two, could even be borderline level three investor, where they got 2 fullplexes, possibly, maybe like you said, 5 homes that they're sitting on, and they're at the point of like, where do I go next? I kind of want to grow, but I don't want to play with the little stuff anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they at. They've built a system. They have a system in place that they're already using and utilizing. They like this game. How do I grow? How do I go to the next level at this point? That's your level two. Do we want to jump
Well,
up
I
to
would
the
say
next
level
level?
two that I realized the emotional growth that they have is that they realize that where the property's located isn't it's not the end of the world. And I think that's where level one gets stuck, because level one is, I wouldn't live there, therefore I'm not going to buy the property. Level
Yeah.
two is, does it cash flow? Is it in a good location? Obviously, you don't want to get a bad location, but is it in a location where rents are good? And they're more about the numbers, whereas level one is more about the feeling. Does this feel right? Does this home look right? Would I live there? Would I live in this neighborhood? They overanalyze.
Analyze, paralyze.
Right, versus level two, it's kind of like you realize it's a numbers game. It's a business. You have enough of them. You're right. You're kind of not ready to play with the small stuff anymore. At this point, you're starting to create cash flow. I think level two, they also see the long-term benefit of owning rentals. They're not, most people look at it level one and they say, well, my rents are $2,000, my payment's $1,900. I will never make money on this. Level two is, hey, in 5 years, my payment is $2,000 because my taxes went up, or maybe $2,100, but my rents are $3,000. And they realize the gap that happens over a period of time between level one, where all you're thinking about is the moment, and level two is the rents. The future rents are going to continue to go up. Therefore, my spread, as long as I could get in and cash flow X, and that X might be 100, maybe it's 150, maybe it's 2, over a long period of time, now all of a sudden I know that I could grow that, because my rents are going to they're going to outpace the expenses. So I feel like level two is kind of like where that light bulb either ticks, where they start getting really tactical with it. And I think this is where the crossroads happen. They either get really tactical with it because they understand every year I need to raise rents, versus level one is, I have a good tenant. They don't call me. I don't want to
I
be
don't want to
bothered.
touch it.
Right?
Yeah, I see that
And
all
because
the
of
time.
that, they want to jump to level three, like you said, not play with the small things anymore. Whereas, or this is what I see with level two. It becomes overwhelming. They become too emotional with it. They become too emotional with the things that happen in the property. They then say, I want out.
Exactly.
They're tapping out, right?
see that.
I think that happens at level
You either
two.
made for it or you're not. You either love it or you hate it. It's that kind of relationship you have with the investment world. And that's another reason when people come to me and they're like, I want to buy 50 doors. It's like, no, time out.
Yeah, first start with one.
Let's start with at least a duplex.
Yep.
Like, okay, you don't want to play with single family homes. Let's get you in a duplex or fourplex. Let's dip your toes in there and see if you even like this game. At the end of the day, let's have you build a system. Let's put that in place. Make sure you have a team behind you when things break down, that they can show up and fix these things for you. They come in hot-headed, like, let's go. And then when they start getting those phone calls, or when those things break down, or God forbid they have a death in the building, and now like emotions go at all times high, and now your level two investor all of a sudden no longer likes this
they're
game.
tapping
I
out.
absolutely hate this. Get me out of this. What have I gotten myself to? or they feed off of it. And they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Let's go. What do I do? How do I do it? And actually, that's something I want to touch on a little bit with people that are in that level 2. Don't bottleneck your money. Don't, like, your property, most likely, yes, you're making a couple $100 a month on these buildings, but that particular home that you paid 300,000 for perhaps worth 600,000 today. You know, you have 300,000 equity in it. You can take that money, take it out of state, and buy something bigger. Instead of one home, you possibly may be able to buy a 15-unit apartment complex. Instead of making $6,000 a year, you can turn that money around and have your money make you more money, in a way, essentially.
Leveling up. You're leveling up your properties. And
right?
Does that happen at level 3, would you say? Is when they start
Yes.
thinking bigger.
Yes.
They start thinking more leverage. They start thinking 1031 exchange, right?
Exactly. That's
and
what you're
and
doing.
and that's where I think another, so now that we're talking about level 3, I think another emotional side of level 3 is, you know, we got over the fact that level 1, it's all about how does the property feel. Level 2 is we realize it's a business. Level 3, what I see is that's when they look at it and say, how do I get more rent at this property? Then they look at it and they say, is there a unit here that we could park an RV on? Is there a huge garage on this property that could rent separately instead of renting it with the property? They start looking at properties that have the ability to level up the rents. Maybe they look at one where I've seen people do this, where they'll buy a split level, and they will cut, and that has a kitchen downstairs, and they'll block off and create 2 separate units and rent that out. Some of them go to room rent, where they'll buy a home next to a university and rent out the rooms. This is where, like, level 3, you don't see a property as a one tenant renting it out. You start viewing all the different ways you could increase your rents per the property. And I think that's one part of it. The second part of it is what you talked about, which is how do we take this property now that we have, or this portfolio that we have, and go to that next stage.
Go to the next level.
You're right. And I think level 3 to me is anywhere between, now you have 10 plus doors. You're still in residential only. I think in commercial world, we will get to that in a second. You're still in residential, and you could, in my opinion, at level 3, you have 10 to maybe 50 people paying your rent, maybe, but they're all single family. You probably no longer need to work if you don't want to. You probably have enough cash flow. You have enough equity that you've built. This is not something that it happened overnight. This is something where this is like a second career to you. You're probably 7 to 10 years in it. You know, you've really realized the value of increased rents, cash flow, markets, all that. And I think a level 3 investor, they're looking for as much leverage as they can, because they know that at the moment of the close, whatever the rents are, it means nothing. And I think they're seeking out the weak people that have properties listed that are undervalued, that are failing because they don't, deferred maintenance, and maybe they're working with an agent that is listing their home that doesn't, that's just there to list their home, and you could clearly see that somebody just ran this property poorly, and they could take it, and all of a sudden, to me, that's a level 3 investor.
And I think that's when you and I got on the phone, when I was ready to switch gears. I'm like, I kind of have 20 doors. I'm tired of playing in here. Let's go out of state. And then your eyes bulge up. You're like, dude, what are you doing out of state? How are you going to do all of this? What was it, 3 years ago? It was right before COVID.
It was right before COVID. So it's probably around 4 years ago when you said, hey, thinking about buying in Alabama. Here's why. Here's what's going in there. Here's what I see. Here's where I could take the rents. So maybe, and I think that's when, level 4 hit, where you became a level 4 investor.
You think that's what it was for?
I think that's where level 4 is. Now you're thinking commercial.
Now you're thinking commercial.
And I know you had a commercial building at that point.
Here
it was a small commercial building, but nonetheless, you had one. And I know you were doing very well on it. And you ended up selling it.
There's numbers on that one. Get this. So on that commercial building, 13 unit complex. So what happened is I had a duplex in Renton that you financed, by the way.
Yep, remember that one?
Bank owned. I 1031 exchanged it. I bought a 13 unit complex down south, South King County. And then I had that for 6 or 7 years. And then I see numbers. So that particular building, 13 unit, was bringing $75,000 a year, is what I was pulling out, which is not bad,
That's
right?
great. I mean, that's.
I mean, heck, that's great money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing, I saw another building out of state, 48 doors, exchange my 13 unit into 48 doors. I'm bringing 75K here. That one had potential of 180-ish. I'm at 220 right now.
You're at 220 now.
So from making 75,000 a year, I was able to make my more money at 220 a year.
And remind me, how much did you have to bridge the gap at all on a down payment for the new one? No. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. When you level up, if you do it right, you could just keep making your properties bigger.
Have more babies, have more money.
That's
like
right.
your money is making you money. It's like this infinite money glitch you find, right? At the end of the day is what it is. So I 1031 exchange it. I took slightly under $1 million. Pissed me off, I won't lie to you, because I really wanted that $1 million in proceeds to take with me. But the building I bought that I exchanged it into was 2.1 is what I paid for it, for 48 doors out of state. So took that $1 million, put it in here. It was a value add. At the end of the day, the rents were vastly undervalued. I can't remember what they were charging. They're mainly one beds and or studios. Those units that are in there, they were charging $300 to $400 a month. We're currently 3 years later charging $795 on a one bedroom, $715 on a studio.
So essentially, there was deferred maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
They were charging the rents were undervalued because of the deferred maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Poorly managed.
Very poorly managed.
And all of a sudden, you come in, and that's somebody that's just kind of like done with my property, and you come in and you see gold in it. Now, walk us through. I think this is really where, and it talks a lot about this in your book, of building the team, doing it right. Walk us through what that was like, because I know it wasn't easy. I know that, especially the first property. Now, I know you've bought in more since then. But the first one, you probably ran into a lot of unexpected issues, because when somebody hears this from the side, a lot of people think, oh, it's like, playing video games. You just sold one, you buy another one, and now all of a sudden your ticker was showing 75K and now it's showing 220. But that doesn't tell the story. In between all that, there's definitely things that you need to do. So walk us through, if you're going into level 4.
So that was my second building, the one we just brought as an example. The 48 door was my second building out of state. The very first one I bought was 2019 December, right before COVID hit, 24 doors. That one I brought down payment myself. It wasn't a 1031 exchange or anything. That's how I got my foot in the door. Building a team. Before you think of buying anything out of state, you have to build your team. Who does your team consist of? It's your real estate agent, it's your lender, it's your attorneys, it's your landscaper, it's your pest inspector. It is regular inspector, like anyone and everyone you could think of. You need to have that team solid and in place before you build a building. You can't play this game alone, right?
Meaning you're not building these people as you go. You've already identified them up front. You need to have it
established. You identified them up front. And it's a daunting task. Like, how do I build that team? So what we ended up doing, I was on a phone calling commercial agents is a completely different beast. Let's just start there for a second. They don't want to work with you. They don't want to talk to you. They do not return your phone calls. They don't give a damn how much money you have. So you're like trying to call them for months and months and months. They don't return your calls. You tell them how awesome you are. You tell them the bags of money that you have and the magic fairy dust that you're about to sprinkle. They don't care.
Why do you think that is?
Because they have investors that are with them who perform. When that phone rings and he calls and says, Oleg, I have a deal, Oleg says, let's go. And when Nelia calls and says, hey, I want that deal, he's like, dude, I don't know you. Why am I giving it to you? I got Oleg in here. He's loyal.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So they already are. Most of them are already established.
They're very much established.
And I know that in the commercial world, a lot of people don't realize the extreme competition that's there. Like the minimum barrier of entry is everyone's loaded. Everybody's got great financing.
Absolutely.
There's no one
they're all awesome rock stars,
they're
and they're
all-
pleasure to work with. Can we just start?
because you're in the big leagues, right?
They're
At the end of the
amazing
day.
to work with. They're
Yeah.
appreciative. They don't suck the life and energy out of you, which is a mistake a lot of the rookie investors make. They think that I can flaunt my money, like shake it around, and you're gonna salivate. It's like, no, I'm the millionaire maker here. Like, the mentality is completely different in that world. So that's one thing. Actually, I talk about that in my book about teamwork and team building and how do you break that barrier? Like, how do you go break into that?
And how do you,
place.
how would you say what way do you break into that? And
There's
is
a lot
it
of butt kissing there
is it-
involved.
okay?
Yeah.
All right.
We flew out. He gave us 2 hours, and I'm not exaggerating. We flew for 3 days. He gave us 2 hours of the day, but every hour of the day, I had somebody booked. I had an agent booked. I had a property manager booked. I had contractors booked with me, and inspectors and insurance agents. Like, we were talking to multiple people. I didn't want to waste my time. But the agent I did want to work with, he gave us 2 hours of his time. We drove out to 2 different properties, and he's like, yeah, okay, we're good. I got to go. Like, I don't know if you're a jokester. I don't know who
Did
you
you end
are.
up
You're
working
pissing
with
me
that
off.
agent?
We ended up working with that agent, but it was constant follow-up. Hey, Oleg, like, what do we got? What do we got? What do we got? You take them out for lunches or breakfast or dinners or whatever it is. You pick up the bill. You constantly stay on top of it. And you're not, like, you are, like, the nicest thing and the most pleasant person that they would ever want to deal with. That's how you need to come across to them.
Yeah, and I wish residential real estate was done that way too, because unfortunately people don't value
They don't.
really really good agents out there, unfortunately. But that makes sense, especially because if you think about it, and I think this is where a lot of people think they're gonna jump over the first 3 levels of investing, get straight into commercial. And a lot of them are like, well, I have $100,000 or $200,000 or even $500,000.
Nobody cares.
No one cares.
Nobody cares.
Because
even
so
if you have
does
30 million,
everyone
I've seen
else.
that. You can have 30 million in your account. They don't care.
Well, I know you've, and some people that know you know this, and I know you don't really talk about this too much, but I know you work with a lot of professional athletes, and I mean you and I know you see that side of it too, and a lot of them do have a lot of funding, and they have money that they're able to really go into any place, and I'm sure it's no different for them. At the end of the day, you gotta earn that relationship.
And banks qualify them regardless of what you got or who you are. Banks will still qualify them based on what is your experience. Because when you buy properties in that level, you have to have a resume put together. You have to have your experience listed out. Like, this is a failing property, and tell us why you think. The bank will ask you, tell us why you think you can turn this around, because this owner has had it for 5 years. They weren't able to fix it. Why are you going to be able to just waltz in here and fix all these problems? And how are you going to fix all these problems? And what are you charging? And what are you basing all of this,
Right.
whatever you're telling us, off of?
You're buying a business. What's
You're
your
buying a
business plan?
business, yeah.
And what's
What's your business plan?
what's your experience of being, a business owner? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And I think that's another reason why you got to go through those first 3 levels. You have to have that, that emotional growth. You have to build that experience, because once you're in the big leagues, once you're there, if you don't have all that, 1, you're just going to be another failing property, or 2, you're not going to be able to get financing or anybody to really work with you. So level 4 is now you are buying your first commercial building. You probably have, would you say, up to 100 units. You've now established a team. You really get it. You really understand how to level properties up. let's talk about level 5, which I consider you a level 5 investor. I know you said like, hey, I don't know if
I
I'm
don't
there
know.
yet. Are you sure? And I
Yeah.
said, no, you're there yet. 160 doors, obviously over 100 doors.
Mm-hmm.
You have 160 families every month that you're providing housing to,
Mm-hmm.
which is first off amazing. I know that your quality, the quality that you bring to these properties does make people's lives better. It's unfortunate when people are living in a property that's run down,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that not just the financial part of it is what we seek. When you become a successful level 5 real estate investor, you're truly trying to better the neighborhoods, to
Mm-hmm.
better the properties, better
100%.
people's lives. And I think that purpose kind of ties in, and that just makes it all better. It makes you pay attention to more of the little details,
Mm-hmm.
makes you not cut corners on on the little things,
Mm-hmm.
because you are looking at it from more big picture. So as a level 5 investor, you're more than 100 units. You're starting to realize what with financing. What does that person need as far as liquid? What does that look like as far as cash flow, time investment? Like if I want to be a level 5 investor, I'm clear I'm not. What does that look like? How much time does that take from you? What does your week look like from just running your properties?
So it could be as intense as you want it or as off hands as you want it. When you're off hands, chances are I'm going to come in and buy that building from you because you're off hands, right?
Right?
Those are the ones that we go after at the end of the day. But initially when you buy these properties with the 40 plus doors, it takes about, and again I usually go after value add buildings, it takes about a year and a half to 2 years to stabilize them. So for 2 years, every morning you wake up, it's like, okay, what do we got? Who's in eviction? Or who didn't pay? What steps did we take to offer them solutions on? These are the companies you can go to help you catch up with the rent, whether it's, I don't know, hospital bills, whatever set them behind, right? We try and help them out to get those bills figured out and get them up on their feet and running. Or are they, problem tenants? Like, I'm pretty involved at the end of the day with my team. Yes, they're amazing. Yes, they're great. But to give you an example, yesterday morning I was walking to, oh my God, we got mice. Somebody says we got mice in the walls. And I'm like, okay, like, did we call pest control? Yes, we did. Do we have traps? Yes, we did. But like, I could tell the tenant is getting under her skin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, at that point, it's like cancer that you just have to cut off and get rid of, let go. I'm like, offer her to move her into another unit, like another
Mm-hmm.
building, or offer her to break her lease. Like at that point, as a leader, you just need to step in and see what is important. Is this tenant important to me, or my team's sanity is important to me?
Right.
Because that's taking away from her needing to collect rents from everybody else or fill in those calls that are coming. Like, she's sucking the life and energy out of her.
100%.
And I can't have that.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, let's move her to another unit or break her lease. Let's do something about this. So those are the day-to-day activities that I am involved in, where I'm coming in on a higher level of like, this is what we're going to do. I need you to concentrate on filling these units and not deal with this problem that we're already taking care of, right?
Right. I mean, ultimately, you're looking at it and saying, is this scenario going to hurt my team in the long run? Because you could have a bad scenario here and there, but if it's always bad, you're going to ruin your team. You're going to burn them out. You're going to be constantly looking to replace them. And so you're making those higher level decisions as, where your team is really in the trenches. You're looking from the top saying, is this good for the building?
Exactly.
And what do I need to do to not just thinking the next month or two, but the next year or two?
Yeah.
Is this good for the building? Okay, that makes sense. So question for you is there, and I know people are going to be watching this wondering, is there a level 6?
I'm sure there is. I just haven't gotten there.
Would you say that's, thousands of units,
thousands
real
of
estate
units,
syndication?
But those are syndicates.
Now you're bringing in major partners.
You're bringing in major partners. You're having nervous breakdowns. You're losing sleep at night over it. And to me, my sanity is a lot more important than not being able to sleep at night. How much money is enough for you?
Right.
There's got to be a point in your life where you need to enjoy your life, right?
For sure. So would you, what's your advice on people that want to bring partners in? I see that all the time from level 1 to level, 3 that I deal with. After level 3, 4, and 5, we don't do commercial financing. That's out of my league. I just know of them.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends in that world. But the question that I have is, what's your advice to people that look at this and say, you know what, if me and my best friend or my cousin or my uncle or my whatever partnered up, we could get here so much faster? What's your advice on partnerships?
I dissolve partnerships on daily basis. Those are the buildings I sell. So I'm always very suspicious about that particular situation when people come to me and say, oh, I want to partner up with my coworker. We're the best. Ooh, it's like, dude, you're going to be married for a very long time. You better mesh and work together and be on the same page. If you do want to partner up, make sure you meet with every decision maker, whether it's their spouses, their parents, their kids. I don't know who those decision makers. Yep. You need to narrow that down. You need to all sit down, talk to each other, make sure you all have exact same goals, right? Because if somebody doesn't agree, oh, and by the way, if the spouse is quiet, they're the ones that are going to derail this deal at the end of the day. It's the quiet ones you want to be scared of.
That's funny.
So make sure you narrow all of that down and make sure every single one of you is on the same page. And sometimes people just chatter away during meeting. Yeah, they were on the same page. It's like, no, they weren't. You were the one that was talking there.
That's funny. That's really, really great advice. If there's only one thing I could add to it, is I think most partnerships fail because when they go into it, they're looking at how much money they're going to be making. Mm-hmm. It's all about how great it's going to be. Mm-hmm. It's all about how, and in their mind, they're already picturing how amazing it's going to be on a vacation and, looking at your bank account and it's just growing. And they put themselves in that environment and they're like, this person would be a great person to celebrate with because we've had some wins together. Mm-hmm. So what people should do is also look at, well, what happens if it goes bad? What happens if you need to bring in an additional $100K in the first, like you said, takes 2 years to typically
to
get a property stable. What happens if more money is needed? Is that person willing? Do they have the ability, and are they willing? Just because they have the ability doesn't mean that they're willing. And in those extreme negative sides, like you have the extreme positive, everything goes perfect, and the extreme negative, you're going to go bankrupt. Is that a person you're willing to be on the same side with when things are going bad?
Those are difficult conversations you have to have. So one and only time I partnered up, so far it's been going great for both of us, but we had to have those difficult conversations. What if we don't have money? You have to have probably at least 6 months worth of reserves. Mm-hmm. When people don't pay or when COVID hits, God forbid, like, things happen throughout the building. You need a new roof. I don't know. Like, things happen at the end of the day. You have to have reserves. It does take 2 years to stabilize a building. And are you okay and ready to not make money at the end of the day? It's a long-term game. It's not a quick skim. It's not a quick thing where you can just wake up in the morning and have $1 gazillion in your account.
Yeah, and if it doesn't go right, and you do need either a new roof or a new this or a new that or need to carry mortgage payments, at least you guys have addressed it and you know your plan. And then it's not a, hey, let's figure this out when things are getting ugly, because the way that they picture it getting figured out might be different than you. They might picture it as in, well, you're pretty loaded, so you should be bringing in the money and I'm going to do the maintenance, or vice versa. Or they might look at it as, oh, we're just going to get a loan. And you might be like, well, I don't want to get a loan.
I don't want a loan.
Because we now are killing our cash flow. And for them, they might not care about the cash flow as much as they care about the build. So I think that's where you create that plan up front if you are going to go into partnerships. So that way when there are cracks, you guys have discussed how to handle those cracks in advance.
I usually look for higher ROI in a partnership for that specific reason. If we have things that go sideways, I have that extra cushion to cover things up. And we already had that complicated and difficult conversation on what if this happens? Now we need to pay our mortgage, our taxes, our insurance. We have to have those funds reserves as well.
So I'm glad you brought this up. I think that a lot of people, regardless, well, this happens more obviously on the entry level, level 1, level 2, and maybe this changes in level 3, is when they do projections on a property, most people project best case scenario.
Yeah.
And they make a decision off best
Yep.
case scenario. And it sounds like you have a different way of projecting. Could you walk us through on how you analyze a property and what you feel like you do a little bit differently than an average investor?
Again, I think it's important that they start with the single
For sure.
family home, that they start with the duplex, triplex, and or fourplex, so they know how this game is played. Once you know how this game is played, once you know the numbers a little bit, what the expenses are, what to expect, how things work, then you can start playing your way up to the top. But the way I run my building, for example, we were looking at a building yesterday, I was analyzing it. Horrible. Terrible numbers, negative. I can't understand. I'm like, why the hell is this negative? Like, what am I looking at? Like, why is this so bad? So I start breaking numbers down even more. It's a syndicate, and he's paying himself $170,000 a year. Then there is another payroll of $79,000 a year. I hope you're adding numbers up at
Yep.
the end of the day.
Yep.
When I was also, and then there was advertising of like $20K. I'm like, what the hell are you advertising? Everything is free.
Mm-hmm.
So they were fudging with their numbers because obviously they don't want to pay taxes, right?
Okay.
And when you look at the numbers deeper, you're like, okay, so this is why they're negative. I'm not going to have to pay myself all these fees. I'm not going to have all these other expenses that they're having. So being able to break these numbers down on a deeper level and understanding why some buildings are ran poorly than others and knowing how you're going to turn that around is also an important thing to know. But you're not going to get there unless you start it from
Start
the
at the
beginning
bottom.
and work
Yep.
your way up.
Yep. You know, it's kind of like the best analogy to tie this to. It's like if you go into any business,
Mm-hmm.
let's just say, just your typical local bank,
Mhm.
right? Like you're gonna have to start in the mailroom, and you have to understand how the mail works, and then you're gonna have to understand how the people process the checks, and then you have to work your way up to the teller, then you have to work your way to the vault teller, then the assistant manager, then the manager, and then the manager of a lot of branches. Then you keep you to the
Your
point
way
where
up.
you run the actual bank. You can't just go from, hey, I learned this in a book and now I'm going to run the bank, because you're not going to understand how the little things work. And I think a lot of people, when they look at, like, if you look at running a bank, it's common sense. Oh, yeah, no problem. For sure, that's the way it works.
Right.
When you look at renting a property and building a rental portfolio, everybody feels like by default, they could just do it just as long as they have the money. And it's not just about the money. It is definitely a skill that you have to learn. There's a lot of emotional things you have to overcome as well. So with that said, I guess my final question that I would have, and I think a lot of people watching this will have, is if you were to go back, I mean, you're a level 5 investor. You've bought from the single families to the huge apartment buildings. You've turned buildings that were failing into very, very profitable buildings that now are worth way more because they're profitable. Do you have any mistakes, any regrets, anything that you would change if you were to go back and redo it all?
I don't think so, because all those experiences have brought me and or taught me what I know today. There was one tenant actually that I learned at the end of the day that was when I managed back in the day. She was the one that would suck the life and energy out of me. I ended up selling the building. I hated her so much.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, had I let her go and broke her lease, it would have been okay, which is the advice I gave my property manager yesterday with the tenant that was draining her.
Yep.
Let her go.
Is really
Let him go early. Let it go.
let it go
Don't
early.
hold on.
And which is really the emotional side of it, right? And just really understanding that emotional growth that you're going to have as a landlord. So, well, I know our time is coming up here, Nelia. Any final comments that you want to make? Any final information that you want to share before we wrap up?
I think we got everything. If anybody wants to get a hold of you to get approved or whatever, how do they go? How do they?
Just either Google me or reach out to me on my cell. which is the 425-478-7676 number. That's our team line. We've been doing mortgages for 18 years. We help a ton of different investors buy property, buy and hold. We do it all up until commercial. Once it goes commercial, we obviously seek you out to help with your contacts, which I know those are always changing. And commercial lenders, they come and go. They're good one day, next day they're not. Depending on what's happening in the banking world, like right now, what we see is happening, where in the last few months we've had a few big banks fail. That changes commercial lending dramatically, right? So I would just say yes, reach out to us. We'll help you up into a level 3. And then hopefully then at that point, you're experienced enough to jump into that commercial space.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for coming out and being here. And hopefully we inspired a couple people to do something about it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, Nelia. And thanks for walking through the 5 levels of real estate investing.
Absolutely. Thank you.